sometimes scary.
Very worried.
Not very optimistic.
Stressed, anxious.
How are you feeling?
Scared. I mean, especially where we're going. I mean, it's good that countries like Finland and a lot of countries are working on climate change, but I do also realize that majority of the world isn't working on climate change. They're not, the goals that the UN said, they haven't been met. It isn't something that is actively being worked on, and if we see what's happening all around the world right now due to climate change and what can happen in the near future if we don't work towards mitigating it, then that'll be a real problem. मेरा नाम शामिर अजीम मलिक है और मैं कराची पाकिस्तान से हूँ.
Drama Reti Maneistist.
Pues mucho gusto, soy Sebastián Figueroa de México.
So my name is Wolfgang. I'm from the US.
Sunana Khalifa. A Zaria zan ce akwai itatuwa da yawa a makarantar. Sannan yana kowane lokaci idan ina makarantar yana tunan da amfanin irin shuka itatuwa da kuma amfanin su ga canjin yanayi.
Men eskachand to'suz negizimen sharm to'run arasında turadi. O'sha uchun har bir jaqdan to'ni ko'rsin bo'ladi.
Ndinonzi kutenda chimbetete.
Mein Name ist Lea, ich komme aus Hamburg in Deutschland.
So my name's Edward Leo and I'm from Malaysia.
Mi nombre es Teddy, soy de Argentina.
山口恵乃です。で、日本に住んでいて、日本の和歌山っていうところで，我自己从小也是特别喜欢逛公园。在学校里的时候，我经常偷偷跑到外面去，然后去看那边的森林。
Então, eu lembro de vários dias em que eu saía, levantava da cama e pensava, pô, depois da aula hoje eu vou pro parque. Saía, voltava da escola e eu passava no parque só para passear, para andar. E eu tinha um caderninho. E aí no caderninho eu pegava e começava a desenhar.
நான் குட்டியாக இருந்தபோது மழை வந்ததுன்னா நான் என்னோட அம்மா என்னோட ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸ் எல்லாம் எடுத்து நம்ம கீழே போவோம். கீழே போய் நம்ம மழை இருக்க பொழுது நம்ம டான்ஸ் பண்ணிட்டு இருப்போம். அது எனக்கு ரொம்ப பிடிச்சது. ஏன்னா அந்த மூஞ்சியில் தண்ணி விழுறது, எல்லாருமே ஆடுறா ரொம்ப நல்லா இருந்தது.
Напевно, один з найулюбленіших моментів – це коли в Коста-Риці ми плавали на заході сонця в океані з моїми друзями з абсолютно різних частин світу. І коли ти відчуваєш силу хвилі, яка тебе накриває, промені сонця, які торкаються твого обличчя, і після того ти своїми пальцями в них відчуваєш пісок, ти розумієш, наскільки природа сильна, і ти малесенька частинка, як краплинка піску в цьому світі, але ти можеш так багато змінити.
The general public, I don't think they are aware of the harmful effects of climate change. They are not. And even those that are aware, they don't take active effort into actually mitigating it.
What do you think that is?
I mean, I'm thinking of a lot of reasons right now. One I would say is maybe they know about climate change, but they don't know its impact. They don't know what it can do. I mean, maybe there's flooding, but maybe they don't also think that climate change caused the flooding. So there's that disconnect between that. And also, some people just do not know.
Climate change definitely is noticeable. I think generally climate change affects different countries not equally. So in Germany, the changes have been more subtle maybe. Definitely one thing is that in winters, I know my grandparents would always talk about Christmas being snowy, white Christmas every year, and this is not happening anymore.
There are less places to ski in Estonia because all the places where you can ski, they have to now make their like artificial snow, which I remember wasn't as big of a thing when I was like a smaller child. And we would have those like beautiful long white Christmas. For example, for me this year, that during April it was that we had this, it was very hot one week and everybody was already like in their summer clothes or okay, this is like a summer, and then next day we got like a full blown, it was like snowing. So there's been a lot of like, and then people were like, oh, that's a sign that like the climate change isn't real, that we have like snow in like April, that means that it's like, well, like we have no issue, like the climate isn't getting warmer. Because in reality, that's a sign that actually we are going through like climate change.
Another big aspect is just extreme heat. I'm pretty sure this October actually was like, broke so many records for being one of the hottest Octobers on record. That can kill people in some cases, so that's pretty bad. And even if there's a small increase in temperature, as it keeps going, these extreme temperatures keep appearing, it's gonna affect wildlife and people. Obviously, you can't really go outside when it's super hot.
Even though Brazil is known for being very hot, we aren't used to these prolonged periods of hotness, and a lot of people have been struggling with keeping water reserves, keeping, for example, their crops, anything that grows is already dying a lot, so soy has been a very big problem.
I would say in northern Argentina, there's also been a lot of heat waves that have affected both people and also the economy.
We've been getting a lot of heat waves, and because Malaysia's already hot all year round, it's really, really bad.
It's getting very hot each summer, like super hot, like 40-degree hot. A lot of people are struggling to adjust to that kind of temperature change. Like my mom would not want to go outside during summer, and that makes her feel more closed, and it makes it hard for her to be positive. So then, like, we would argue a lot during summer because it's too hot and it's so stressful.
My dad can't sleep because of the heat, and it's strange because in their generation, a lot of them and their friends have noticed like temperatures getting hotter in our hottest period of the year. And like for the first time, people are considering getting air conditioners, which is something that no one really needed to do before. And when my parents told me about that, I was like, wow, I have not even considered doing that in Harare, in Zimbabwe. And it's insane that that kind of shift has gradually happened in the course of my lifetime and, in my parents' lifetime.
I remember back in like 2014, 2015, we had to regulate our water use so we couldn't use as much water. Close to my house, there's like this lake called Folsom Lake. And when we first got there, the lake water level was just insanely low, like super low water. Actually, like outside of my house where I'm from, there's kind of this like field of grass, and the grass, it's all dead after the drought. It's just terrible. And then it actually lit up, and there's like a huge fire like right next to my house. I was like, oh.
I think the most obvious impact of climate change in Zimbabwe has been the drought that has stretched on for 4 years now, and they've like something like 6 million people food insecure. The reason why it's been so devastating for us is because Zimbabwe is literally like an agriculture-based society, and a lot of rural families and a lot of families in general depend on growing their own food. And so when, due to climate change, rainfall patterns shift, there's just been much less rain, hence the drought for 4 years. And so it's 6 million people who are going to be without food, in danger of like severe hunger.
But there were some people, obviously, when water is that expensive, and the city said even if it's your own property and you have like a borewell, you're not allowed to like use it because that water was that water belonged to the city. So then people, like, I'm sure the people who were much poorer and needed the water weren't able to get even like the bare minimum water, especially during those hard months, because it was so expensive and the city was like upcharging it a lot, and you had to like, if you wanted water from like the river, then you had to hire these like truck drivers. I think drinking water was fine, but like showering, laundry, washing your dishes, all of these things that you would think are like super basic day-to-day things, you're like, yeah, of course I'm gonna shower today. But then you're like, am I gonna shower today?
In Nigeria, we don't have much other effects of climate change like tsunamis or wildfires that much. It's usually floods and droughts, and they have become worse every year.
That the impact of climate change in my country is pretty significant, specifically because of the fact that our country is mountainous and we have a lot of ice peaks. We have a lot of like all this ice that is on the surface of mountains. And due to the fact that our planet is getting warmer and warmer, a lot of them are melting. And because of that, we have like flooding, landslides, like it's all mixing up, and all of that is just like coming down the mountains towards the areas that people live in. And it may result in a lot of problems, like in a lot of land that people use to, like for farming, it's being destroyed. Roads that are like, basically like all the interconnection between people is also being somehow like damaged by the fact that landslides block the roads basically. Or also the fact that there are even some casualties because people don't know where exactly they may appear. Like right now people are trying to predict them, but we're still not there yet.
In 2019, we had a cyclone, which was a big thing. Everyone in the country was talking about it because it's so rare to have a natural disaster in Zimbabwe, because it's like, what? The nature is supposed to be our friend. But that cyclone was really devastating, and because we don't have natural disasters very often, if ever, no one was very prepared to go in and rebuild after that. A lot of people, once they were displaced and left homeless, they weren't able to like move back into the places that were destroyed. They just had to leave. That cyclone took a lot from people, and if those weather events keep happening, it's unlikely we'll be able to rebuild in the way that I suppose a richer country would be able to.
There's a region called the Ata, and there was a massive flooding there. Where it was raining for days on end, and there's a river that then flooded, and a lot of the houses were destroyed. Until now, they're still trying to rebuild. I think around 140 people died, and that was very, very big in the media. It was definitely, like, for Germans, a wake-up moment of like, okay, this is affecting communities, people we know, people losing their homes.
Territory that we use for agriculture to feed our animals, like our livestock, is being destroyed. My extended family has a lot of, like, I would say, a pretty good amount of livestock. And for example, like last year, 20 to 30 sheep of ours just died, just disappeared because of the fact that we didn't know that there would be landslides at the time.
Basically, after the cyclone, the municipality, the local government there said like, oh, people who live in this part of Chimanimani, you guys need to leave, because we now see that this is a very dangerous place. When there's flooding or a cyclone, your house is going to get swept away. And when we were at her house and she was telling us about when the cyclone hit, she described how terrified and shocked, surprised everyone was when, like, it's 3 in the morning, it's been raining forever. My grand aunt like opened the door and she saw houses and bodies like flowing down the side of the hill, and no one really knows what to do. And it's like, this is terrible. So venturing out of Harare, you hear more and more stories about how floods and the cyclone Idai, affected people.
There was a flood in Nigeria, in Maiduguri. As a result of that flood, over 1,000 people lost their lives. And that is a very huge loss, and nothing caused it but climate change.
Problem that we faced right now is that even if the people at the top, the ministry, wants to do something to solve the issue, there are so many different layers involved, right? So different offices that are supposed to do certain things, there's corruption in them as well. So look at it like this, look at it like a funnel, right? So from the top, the budget is this much. It's like, let's say 10,000, whatever, it's $10,000. By the time it gets down to the actual where prevention methods or whatever needs to happen, by that time only like $500 or like $1,000 will be left. So that's, I think, the main issue, because the top, there's corruption at the top, then corruption in the middle, corruption at the bottom, and when all of that comes together, there's no funding left for what actually matters.
Basically, they cannot do anything. The government kind of decides what happens on their lives when it comes to war issues, because you cannot do anything if a big company or something is taking away water from your community. It's kind of the decision the government takes rather than your own decision.
Yeah, people do know, but they are careless at the same time. So it's like, it's really difficult to say that they're actually aware. You see on the news, for example, that the earthquake is happening or the temperature is rising, but you just only see the facts. And like, you see the footage and you see people struggling, but nobody or no news articles get to the reason why it's happening. Like, it might touch on one point, but it never says that, okay, climate change is the deep factor.
Another common practice in Pakistan is burning trash. So since we don't have proper recycling systems, what people tend to do is they just take a bunch of trash after a couple of months, a couple of weeks, and just burn all of it, which creates emissions. So it's not really great.
Haze was like a really bad big thing. 1 month of the year, it'd be like usually like, I think September if I'm not mistaken. It'll happen for like a couple of weeks where we have like really bad haze to the point where school would be cancelled. And this haze was actually coming, I think, from Indonesia because they were burning palm trees. So it wasn't from Malaysia, but we were really impacted from like the burning.
You will see big industries with smoke going out of them at all times.
I saw this thing that living in the capital of India, because it's so polluted, breathing just the air in is equivalent to smoking like 6 cigarettes a day. So you could get like lung cancer from just being in the capital, and that level of like pollution is so bad. Like if you go to the capital, you can literally see the like pollution in the air, and it's so bad. And if we don't have the air to breathe and if we don't have the water to drink, then what is the point of having the city?
Something like having your house destroyed affects you much more if you don't have the means to kind of buffer that and hold that.
When these things kind of hit you, like for example the flooding, can you afford to like go find somewhere else to stay? Can you like purchase all your items back? So these kind of things play a factor.
People that rely on agriculture, people that are in the very first sort of step of the supply chain, the ones working in the farms, having that, relying on their harvest for like their economic stability. So if there's a drought and they suddenly don't have enough yield, that's going to affect them for the whole year probably.
It's like two sides of the same coin. Basically, a lot of remote villages are experiencing like the most trouble just because of the fact that, first of all, like any sort of help reaches them like in a very long time.
Like once an earthquake hits that area, it's really hard for them to recover.
The other side of the problem is the fact that in urban areas, we're experiencing the air pollution a lot, and it becomes like it becomes a very big problem for people's health. If we can see that here, we can see very drastic, very dramatic, like in terms of like rural areas, we can see very dramatic problems. Here we see like the subtle, like slow killer type of problem.
I feel that the countries with the most influence kind of don't do much about it. How I perceive it, these countries or people who can afford to care do it, because some people have struggles that affect them more than climate change, or they cannot afford to take their time, invest time in looking for solutions and such when they're being affected by other issues.
They don't have any means to prevent them or to fight them.
I think it's mostly marginalized communities. So I think those are the people who are the most affected.
I think they are on their own. They are quite vulnerable. Yeah. Even after the event has happened, most of them get displaced. The people that don't lose their lives, they get displaced and they have nothing to do, nowhere to go. Yeah, most of them.
I would say I feel responsible.
Stressed, anxious.
Very worried.
Sometimes scary.
Very anxious.
Not very optimistic, because even though I do agree that a lot of people are taking the initiative and are trying to educate people about effects of climate change and are trying to themselves do things that are more sustainable, I think a large population either are not aware or do not give it much weight. And I think we need to change that.
It's terrible that I can't really think of many ways that we could solve the climate challenges Zimbabwe faces. I struggle to imagine how things could get better than they are today, or better than they were 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
So I am happy that we're having this conversation, but I don't feel the most hopeful. I think that there's a lot of talk in this issue, but there's not much action. And even like from my personal experience, I've been working in a sustainability consulting firm, and I feel like so many of them are just doing it for the greenwashing aspect, and there's not much action happening. So I would say that since I've gotten more into climate, I've become more hopeless, unfortunately.
I think the state of the world is, I mean, I love living in it, but I also wish that like my grandchildren will like have like a good life in the future. And with the data which way they're deteriorating, it's starting to feel less and less possible.
I think it's gonna get worse in every regard, including like climate change, but also like the polarization and like political conflicts. I think it's not gonna get better. It has to get worse to get better.
I want to be optimistic, but I just don't really see how that's going to happen. It hurts me because I know that these actions that I do are helping, but it's so unimpactful in the grand scheme of things.
I see a lot of people that are my age struggling with kind of giving up and stopping to advocate their worries. Also, it's so brave to keep fighting for this, even though you feel like nothing changes. Because I think it's a brave kind of optimism of not giving up and saying, okay, but we can change something. Ich würde sagen, als Kind bin ich sehr, sehr behütet aufgewachsen zwischen Natur, Wälder. Und was ich als kleines Kind gemacht habe, um mir die Zeit zu vertreiben, war, ich habe eine Reihe an Schnecken gesammelt und dann habe ich ein Schneckenrennen gemacht. Die Schnecken auf die Startlinie quasi drapiert und dann ging's los und habe ich Schnecken angefeuert. Let's go, let's go.